Alright, back with another solve, this time sleep as a sport. So this was the knockout round of 32. I think the average score was around 670 points on this one, so it was not an easy case. And the reason for that is you are working with time formats, which you don't often see in Excel. So this one was actually really instructive for me, because it's not something I've worked with to this high level before. The premise of the case is basically calculating sleep scores, which is based on how many hours you sleep for, how many times you get out of bed, total minutes out of bed, and how many minutes of restlessness you get. Calculating that's fairly straightforward when you know how time formats work, but then the added complication comes in that you have to take the dog for a walk and start calculating how many minutes out of bed and so on for walking the dog, and various people are on dog duty each night. So let's just do a little intro on time formats. So most people know how dates are stored in Excel. So a date will look like this. But that's kind of just the formatting. Underneath in the cell is actually a number. So if I put that in a general format, you get 45292. So if I was to have, 2 dates, I can simply do one date minus the other date, and I know that will be 1. The reason that's 1 is because underneath what Excel is actually doing is just minusing this number from this number. So with time formats, it's kind of a similar situation. So a whole day is 24 hours. So if I just turn these into general format instead of time, you'll see that they're actually proportions of a day. So let's turn them back into time for now. So 24 hours is 1. To enter time, you'll enter the hours, a colon, the minutes, a colon, and then the seconds. So if I enter that and just put that into time format, that will be 12. But really, underneath that's going to be exactly half, because it's half a day. So if I wanted to convert that into hours, I really need to times it by 24, because there's 24 hours in a day. So in the general format, that would give me 12 hours. 0.5 times by 24. Now hopefully that makes sense, and I'm going to do this question 1. So the question here is asking how many hours have you slept for. So if I know I woke up at 11, you'd expect to just do one minus the other. But that is not going to work, because these are proportions of a day. So let's put these in the general format. What I really want to do is, I know that this is the next day. So I want to do that plus 1 to get the proportion of the next day. So it's 1.46. And I want to minus off what we had before. So now I get the proportion of a day we slept for, and I want to times that whole thing up by 24 to get the number of hours. So that is the tricky bit in this case. So the answer is 16 hours. Now we know how time formats work. Maybe I didn't explain that very well, but hopefully it makes sense. We should be able to tackle this case. So for this one, I want to do this plus 1 minus this times the whole thing by 24. And that gives us the correct answer. Let's now tackle some of the bonus questions. Across level 6 and 7, how many nights was it rainy? Game 7 is 7 nights long, so we need to times how many nights it's rainy by 7 there. So this is going to be count if level 6, so this is rainy, plus count if level 7 is rainy, but times that by 7 because we have 7 nights. So it's 25. How many times did Cooper howl on level 6? So on level 6, he howls when it's clear and the moon is more than half full. So that's just going to be another count ifs. So count ifs. This says clear, and the moon phase is greater than or equal to 0.5, and that is 4 times. Okay, across levels 1 to 7, how many times has Dan slept for at least 8 hours before taking into account anything else? So basically we just want to do this again and check if it's bigger than 8, but for the whole case. So let's use my case questions lambda. Whoops. That's going to spit out all the details of the questions. And then I just want to say, so this is the sleep time plus 1 minus this, and I want to times it all by 24, exactly that calculation we did before. And let's drag that all the way down. So on level 7, we need to actually times it by 7 because there's 7 nights. So again, we're going to say count if this is greater than or equal to 8 times 7, so 35 nights. And then let's do exactly the same thing. So let's just drag that up but let's change this to this section, and we don't want to times it by 7. So we get 59. So those two added together is 94 nights in total. 94. What minute was the most common to fall asleep for both Dan and Chrissy in levels 3 to 7? So let's just delete out level 2 upwards here. And what we want to do is find the minute they fall asleep. So that is just minutes of sleep time. And then for level 6 is where Chrissy comes in, and her sleep time is here. So again, let's just do equals minute of this, and then we can use our most of lambda to find out what the most common minute is, and it's 3. And the final bonus relies on question 7, so we'll wait until we do that. So question 2 here, we want to find the sleep score, so we're just going to introduce that in a minute. So it's 10 points for every hour that you sleep. So we basically want this calculation again. So I'll do my workings out here this time. So that's going to be the hours. However, we need to round it up. So let's say round up. We need another bracket there. So 12 hours sleep, and we want to multiply that by 10 to get our base score. I don't know why it's converting to time each time. And then we want to do the minimum between that and 100, because the max score you can get is 100. So minimum of 100 and that should be our answer there. And then next up, we have restless minutes come in. So you lose 3 points per restless minute. So let's do our workings here, and we want to do minus the restless minutes times 3. So that matches the example, so pretty confident there. And then we're going to introduce times out of bed and out of bed minutes. So we want to do minus times out of bed, and for each time out of bed it's 7 points, so times 7 minus minutes out of bed, and it's going to lose 8 points for that, times 8. So that matches the example, so again, pretty confident. So up to there, the case is fairly straightforward. 580 is a respectable score. This is where it kind of gets a little bit hard, because we have to calculate the times out of bed and minutes out of bed. And the way that's determined is by whether you walk the dog or not. So the dog has its last meal at a certain time. The dog's always going to wake up 4 hours after that and need walking. If that 4 hours is within the sleep window, you have to get up and walk it. So you lose 7 points for getting out of bed, and the walk lasts 8 minutes. So you lose 8 points times 8 minutes, which is 64 points for the time out of bed. So it's going to be 64 plus 7, we're going to lose 71 points. So let's just bring our base score down here. And we don't want these two things on the end, because we're now going to calculate those. So how do we do that? So let's say let meal time, it's not really the meal time, it's going to be the walk time for the dog, is going to be this plus 4 hours. But we can't plus a 4 like that, we need to do it as a proportion of a day, so let's do 4 out of 24 hours. Then the sleep time is going to be the bedtime, the wake time is going to be this plus 1. We need to remember to plus that 1 because it's always going to be in the next day, so that our calculations work. Then let's figure out what needs to be true for the dog to be walked within the sleep window. So let's say so the meal time has to be after the sleep time, and it also has to be before the waking up time. So if those two things are true, then we're going to lose 71 points. Otherwise, we're not going to lose anything because we walked the dog while we were already awake. So that should be our calculation. And then our total score is going to be the sum of those two things. Now, I kind of made that look quite easy, but doing this live was actually quite hard because you had to read all of this, figure out exactly what it's asking and how to calculate it. And figuring out whether you walk the dog within that sleep window is actually a little tricky because of these +1s. It's very easy to miss those live and end up with the wrong answer. So that's that. Level 6 is where it gets a bit harder. So we're going to basically calculate what we just did for both Dan and Chrissy, determine whose day it is to walk the dog, and then see whose points are bigger, so who has the higher sleep score. There's one added complication. We now have the dog howling. So the dog will howl during its walk if the moon phase is above 50 and the weather is clear. And if the dog howls, then the person who's not walking the dog, i.e. the person who's in bed, gets 5 minutes of restlessness, which is worth 3 points each, so they minus 15 points. So I'm going to set this up in a data table just because I know that for question 7 we're going to have to do this for 7 nights, and if I set it up neatly now, then it will lead on to question 7 nicely. Again, you wouldn't know this live, this is just hindsight of doing the case. So let's delete all this out and do it in here. So example 6. And we want to go G out to N. And let's just convert these into time formats so it looks a bit neater, and this into a percentage. And let's set up our calculation that we had here. So I'm just going to copy that in. And I'm going to move the references around. So we said we want to round up this minus the sleep time. And we don't have restless minutes in this one. We're going to calculate those. That's the howling. So that is the base score of points for sleep for Dan. So let's do Dan here. Let's do Chrissy here. So let's call that D. Let's call that C. So let's copy that formula here, and we're just going to move these to Chrissy's times. So Dan, Chrissy, this is going to be the normal sleep, this is going to be walking, this is going to be howling. It's not very good colour to see those, so let's lighten that up a bit. There we go. So for the walking, we need to figure out who's on duty. So let's bring in our table from, where is it? Down here. So this is the day, this is who does the walk. So let's put that here. So let's do XLOOKUP the day in here and tell me who's on duty. So now what needs to be true for the walking? So we know the sleep time was this, the wake time was this +1, and the meal time was this plus 4 hours. So one additional thing now needs to be true for us to walk the dog, and that is that we're on duty. So we also want to add into our AND calculation, this equals Dan. Okay, and then the howl is a little more complicated, so we'll figure that out in a minute, but let's do Chrissy's waking. So this is going to be exactly the same, but we want to move over to Chrissy's times. And we want this is Chrissy. So for the howl, everything's going to be true of the walk other than the person. So let's just copy this in for now. The howl is only going to impact Dan if it's Chrissy's turn to walk. So let's change this to Chrissy. And we also need to add a couple more things in here. So what else needs to be true? Well, the weather needs to be clear. So this has to equal clear. And this number needs to be greater than or equal to 0.5. Let's just lock that. And then that should give us our howl. However, we need to change the points to -15 instead. So that's our howl. Let's, again, copy this formula over to Chrissy. So the times need to be now true of Chrissy instead of Dan, and the walking, it needs to be Dan walking for Chrissy to be woken up from the howl and have the restless minutes. Okay. Next thing to do is calculate both of their points. So let's say Dan total, Chrissy total. And let's say is the sum of these. It's the sum of these. and we want to know who had the most points. So it's going to be the max of these two things. Let's just pull that down here, and let's do a data table on that. And hopefully I haven't made any mistakes, but that is very easy to do in this case. Okay, I have made some mistakes, so let's check out 96. So 96, normally it's something to do with the walk or the howl. So the walk-in time is going to be just after midnight, so the walk should actually be true. So Chrissy should be walking the dog here. Okay, it's because I didn't move this cell over to Chrissy. So again, easy to make mistakes here. And that's now correct. Now level 7, we do exactly the same thing but over an entire week. And an added complication is that the moon phase will grow 7% each day. Once it hits 100, it will shrink 7% each day. However, because there's only 7 days in a week, the most it could shrink or grow by, if it was always growing or shrinking, is 49%, 7 times 7. So once we hit 100, we are never going to go back down past 50. So I don't care about my down calculation, if that makes sense. So let's do example 7 and show you what I mean. Example 7. Now our calculation's the same, other than we are going to figure out the day. So let's pull down over here. So the day is Sunday, so obviously I want to do that, and I want some kind of formula that then spills down this list regardless of where we start. So if it started at Tuesday, I want it to spill to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So how do I do that? Well, actually, I want to X match Sunday in this list, and that is going to give me position 1. I'm just going to use a different example to show if this was a different day. Let's do 112, so 4, so it's a Wednesday. So what I want is a sequence of 7, but starting at that day. Once I get to day 7, which is the Saturday, I want to cycle back to 1. So I actually want to do mod 7. So mod that 7. So that looks right. My only problem is mod gives you a 0 in the calculation, and I don't want a 0 because I want to look back into this and pull out the day. So we have to amend this by doing a +1 here and a -1 here. And now we start correct and we go from a 1 upwards to a 7. And then finally we just do index of this list with those numbers, and that's going to spill out all of the days. So let's go back to example 7. So there's our days. Then our person, we're going to look up to here. So this is who's on duty. Now I need to calculate the moon phase. So the first one is going to be what we start at, and then we're going to grow by 7. So plus 0.07, so that's 7%. And that's all I need to do, because like I said earlier, I don't actually care if we hit 100 then start going down. So technically here this should cap out at 100 and then start decreasing. But it doesn't matter because I can never decrease back past 50%, so the dog will always howl if it reaches 100. So let's do the base points first. Base points is just this. Our walk is going to be the same. Let's drag it down. So every other day, yep, it's Dan's duty. So the walk should work here. Yep, that looks right. And then the howl is now based off of this moon phase number, which was here. And I don't want to lock it because I want it to move down as the moon phase grows. So hopefully that's correct. And then I should be able to, again, move the moon phase to here and unlock the cell so it moves down with the formula. Just check if that looks right. And then the scores should be the same. We can do a total on them. And then here we want to say the max of these two. Now, I know the bonus question also asks what the biggest loser's score was. So let's also do minimum of those two scores, and we can do the bonus question at the same time. So hopefully this is correct. We'll see. Like I said, very easy to make little mistakes on this, which I have. So the mistake I've made is I haven't pushed my correct question numbers in. At least I hope that's the mistake I've made. We will soon find out. Yes, okay. So that's fine. And the bonus question is asking what the biggest loser's score is. So that's going to be the biggest number out of these. So that's 420. So 420. So when you know how to do this case, it's pretty straightforward. When you do it live, it's hard because there's just a lot of instructions to read. I mean, look at this in level 6, even level 5, to get your head around that in the time limit, it just is difficult. I would also really recommend watching Bo's video on this. His channel is called Excel Wizard, so if you look for this video on that channel, he does it all in a single cell with a very similar method. However, he does a very clever calculation to get this moon phase to go to 100% and then actually start dropping all in single cell. It's very impressive. So that is it for this video. Not many cases left now, and then it will be a new season in January. I'm excited for that. Hopefully I can do a bit better this year than last year. Incremental improvements, and we'll see how we do.